today's topic is participatory economics, which is also called Parecon, and it's a concrete alternative to capitalism that's completely aligned with democratic socialist values, in my opinion. And I hope that becomes more clear as I present. So first I wanted to say that Parecon is just one sphere of life, and Pareconists fight for what's called participatory society, and that includes other spheres like the political system, community sphere, kinship being, like for example, equality between men and women in the household. And I think it's just important to point this out because the economy, it's not making decisions for all of society or anything. There's a lot of other components in the society going on. So why vision? One reason that I've kind of been thinking about recently is that many people, at least in my experience, seem to agree with the leftist critiques of capitalism. So when I talk to people, it's like it's not very difficult anymore to convince them that capitalism is terrible, authoritarian, illogical, wasteful, destructive. But the question they always ask, of course, and understandably, is what do you want to replace it with? And I think the left, a lot of times, we have a hard time giving a good answer to that question. And I think I think that turns a lot of people off. Also, vision gives people hope and direction, so they can orient their activist activities in a way that's consistent with their future goals. And I think it's important to say that Pareconists see Parecon as more of a scaffold than a blueprint. There's a lot of anxiety on the left for offering, blueprints of a future economic system and laying out all the details. And I actually agree. I don't think we should lay out all the details or even, a ton of a lot of things should be decided by a future society. But I do think it's possible and important for us to lay some basic core institutions that are going to accomplish our goals. So here's some values. I'm not going to really spend much time on it because they're just the regular values we hear about, except for two that I find really important. Environmental sustainability. So there's mechanisms built into Parecon that specifically address this issue. Also efficiency. So efficiency is defined as gaining the most benefits to people with the least amount of waste, I guess you could say. But that's how capitalists define it too, like mainstream economists and stuff. But they have a very weird definition of what is benefit. To them, benefit means money for shareholders. Parecon is very efficient, but what it means by benefit is real benefits to society, reducing social costs, etc. Here are some of the core features of Parecon. There's 5, and these are the first 2. So the first one is something called the commons, and it means that the means of production and natural resources aren't owned by anybody. Pareconists see these resources as gifts of nature or gifts of previous generations, and ask the question, why does someone have to own it? And the reason this is really important is because this is going to have implications for the entire economy. So if you want to use natural resources or the means of society's means of production, you have to use it in a socially responsible way, because you don't own it. It's not, you can't just use it however you want. At the very least, you can't harm society at large when using them. And this doesn't mean that, the shirt on your back doesn't belong to you. That's your private property. But it means things used in production, resources used in production. Another principle or core is self-management. And that's the idea that people have an influence on decisions in proportion to the degree they're affected. And I'm not going to spend much time on this because it's very similar, consistent with what democratic socialists mean when they talk about democracy. And it would show up, for example, in a Parecon system, the workplaces wouldn't have owners and employees. It would be a democratic workplace operating on the principle of self-management. This is another core feature. It's called balanced job complexes. And what this means is that every job in the economy consists of a balance of empowering and disempowering tasks. That's broadly like that of all of the jobs. By empowerment, I mean knowledge. It gives you the knowledge, skills, and confidence to make decisions in your workplace and in society. The reason this is important is because even in democratic workplaces like worker co-ops, when they get large enough, you can have a certain segment of the workers become very empowered and end up dominating the decision making. So it's things like managers, lawyers, and other, accountants, things like that. And what happens is when you have, say, your meetings to decide things about the workplace, someone who just does janitorial work all the time, that's their only job, they don't have the knowledge, skills, and confidence to meaningfully participate in the decision making. So in order to have real democracy in the workplace, Pareconists think you'd really need balanced job complexes. And we call that sort of class of people that ends up dominating the coordinator class. And one way it kind of shows up is, for example, in centrally planned economies. So even a centrally planned economy, without capitalists, if you don't have a market, there's no market, so there's no capitalists, but it still could be authoritarian. And the people that are in power are kind of like these professional managerial class people, the economic planners, the lawyers, the physicians, and so they all have more influence than the working class. Another core feature is equitable remuneration, and that means income is based on effort and sacrifice. This consists of how long you work, how hard you work, and the difficulty of tasks that you do. By difficulty of tasks, for example, I mean, say someone doing roofing work, they're going to get paid more per hour of work than someone doing, say, receptionist work. Why? It's because the roofing is harder labor and it's more taxing on your body, which means you're making more of a sacrifice. And I think it's helpful to compare this to how income is dealt out under capitalism. There's two main factors. One is power, and a lot of times that means bargaining power in a market. You're always trying to buy low and sell high. You're trying to get as much out of the transaction as you can at the other person's expense. So it pits you against each other. And if you have a lot of bargaining power, you can make a lot of income. And then in capitalism, another common way to make income is property. So real estate, stocks, or if you're a capitalist and you own a large corporation, you don't even really have to work. Just by owning a corporation, you get a bunch of income. So that's not very fair to Pareconists. Another way that income has been proposed to be based is on output, and some people on the left also support this. But Pareconists kind of see this as, we ask the question, why reward luck in the genetic and circumstantial lottery? So for example, if you're in a workplace and you just happen to be lucky enough that your team is all really skilled and productive, and someone else's team isn't, well, your team is going to produce more, but it has nothing to do with you. It's just kind of luck. You just happen to have better workmates. Also, genetics. So if someone is born with amazing genetic innate talents, that's really great for them, but we don't see any reason to shower a bunch of income on top of it. Also, with the luck, it has no incentive effect too. You can't change that. and you have no influence over it, so it doesn't like incentivize you to work harder or whatever. Another core feature is participatory planning, and I'm going to talk about this more as we go on. But first, I think it's helpful to kind of lay out the structure of the economic system. So on the consumer side, you have, on the lowest level, you have local councils, also called neighborhood consumer councils, and every person belongs to one of these. And they might say consist of 1,000 people or so. And then successively higher levels are based on geography. So you would have city councils, you know, various regional councils, maybe you want counties or whatever, and eventually a national these are called federations, National Federation of Consumer Councils. And these consist of delegates elected by the lower councils. And on the producer side, it's very similar. You have your worker councils, those are workplaces, and then industry federations, and then you go up to the National Federation. And a really important question I'm sure, you know, a lot of leftists would have about this is, you know, how are they kept in check? Because we're very against authoritarianism and things like that. So for one, like I said earlier, Parecon doesn't include the political system. So it's helpful to understand that they're not making all decisions to decide or anything. It's just the economic decisions. The federations are really mostly handling collective consumption. So say a neighborhood, say a city busing system or something, or a regional, you know, system of roads or something. In addition, workers and federations receive income for their effort. So it's not like they can, you know, use their power to get more income and then get more power because they have income. That's how basically our capitalist system works. And they can't trade their income. So it's, you know, this isn't a market. Parecon is a democratic planning procedure. So it has no markets. So you can't say, you know, just keep trading your income and then just trying to make the income off your property. Other possible mechanisms, you have rotation of federation workers, direct recall, and another idea that's been proposed is that if a federation vote is really close, like within some threshold, then the vote would just go to a lower level council. And this keeps things democratic. So now I'm going to talk about allocation, and I'm talking about it on the kind of the smallest basis, so like individual consumers and individual workplaces, and collective consumption, like I said, that's going to be handled by the federations, and I'll explain that a little bit more as we go along. So this is how the democratic planning procedure works. Workplaces create proposals for what products and how much they want to produce. And consumers create proposals for what and how much they want to consume. And they're not, you know, these proposals, the items aren't extremely detailed or anything, it's categories. And once these proposals are in, a group called the Iteration Facilitation Board adjusts prices based on the info it received. So they're doing this to balance supply and demand in subsequent rounds. So this, on this slide, this is one round, or also called iterations. So it consists, well, one round consists of workplaces creating proposals, consumers creating proposals, and the IFB adjusting prices. So what they're going to do is increase prices if there's high demand. So if a lot of people want a product, the price is going to go up in subsequent iterations. Decrease the price if there's low demand. And what this is going to do is in subsequent iterations, it's going to balance out supply and demand. Because now, say on the second iteration, workers and consumers submit their proposals. Consumers are now less incentivized to consume products in high demand because the prices are higher now. And they're more incentivized to consume products in low demand. Workplaces have a very similar incentive, but I decided just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into the details of it unless someone wants to ask that in the Q&A session. But it really has to do with the fact that workplaces are required to produce socially valuable products, and that goes back to the commons. No, they don't. You know, no one owns the commons, so they have to use it responsibly. And this process repeats until a feasible plan is reached for, say, the year. And I think it's helpful to understand what these prices represent. So what they represent is the social opportunity cost of consuming an item. So for example, like I said, if a lot of consumers want a product, the Iteration Facilitation Board is going to increase the price. And the price, it really represents the opportunity cost of consuming that item. If I consume it, then someone else doesn't get to. And this is an item a lot of people want. So the cost is going to go up. So the prices really, they reflect like real social costs. And that communicates valuable information to you as a worker or consumer. So as a consumer, it's easy to see how what products you choose to consume affect others. And because it's this participatory planning, it's dealing with these like real, it's trying to really estimate real costs. It's in effect, it's maximizing the real benefits to society. It's creating a plan that's very efficient, in other words. Here are some further features. Feel free to ask me about them in the Q&A session too. One, like I said, is collective consumption. You can have something like, universal health care, like free education and things like that. And you just plan for it. And the higher councils have to make their collective consumption plans first, because say there's a pie of production potential. And if a higher level council says they're going to use some of that pie on some collective consumption good, then there's less for the lower councils to use up. So it has to go from top to bottom, that part of it. In addition, another key feature is workplaces are charged for externalities like pollution. So for example, if a workplace pollutes a river and there's a community downstream that's affected by that, then the workplace is going to get charged a certain fee that's going to be paid to the consumers that are affected. And the price of that fee is calculated in basically the same way as the regular participatory planning. And consumers, they might not accept any price, so they have the right to do that. And that means the pollution can't, enter the river. In addition, you can update the plan throughout the year. And there's ways to do that I'm not going to really go into too much detail about. You can also take out loans. You can save. That's all fine. Investment planning, that just means planning for, say, like 5 years out or something. And then long-term planning is anything over that, say 20-year plan or something. And I want to just, plug one of our groups in Detroit DSA that's focused on Parecon. So our projects really fall into two broad categories so far. We're about 2 months old or something. One of them is advocating Parecon and DSA. This night school is one way. Also, we published a book review of No Bosses, which is a book about Parecon, and that was published in the Detroit Socialist. You can also get that from DSA's lending library as well. We are working on a Parecon animation. One of our members, Aaron Stark, will be interviewing Michael Albert, who is one of the creators of the system for the Detroit Socialist. And another broad category of what we're doing is we're trying to build a transitional Parecon in Detroit. And right now we're in the preliminary steps to see how viable this is and how we can actually do it. So we're running simulations of a system and creating a system plan, which is basically like a business plan.